Beginning in March, the U.S. Census Bureau will invite households across the country to participate in the 2020 census. But what is the census?
So the census is a population count which is conducted every 10 years, mandated by the Constitution.
The census is part of our democracy. It's how we determine our congressional districts, the funding that we receive from the federal government. And so that's why it's such an important component of our democracy.
In my opinion, it's the largest civil rights issue of the decade.
In Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, they said we're going to conduct a complete census of everybody here. We're going to count everybody. And knowing that things were likely going to change and change rapidly, they said we're going to do it every 10 years so that we can make sure that each part of the country is equally represented.
Today we'll be hosting a training with 15 to 20 of our teachers that teach our classes for our students and our clients and our community members. This training is really going to be a training that is meant to teach teachers not only a general overview of census curriculum, but why is it so important for our communities to participate and engage with it, regardless of age, gender, citizenship status. It really doesn't matter. We just want to count everybody that is on our soil. So that means that we have the opportunity of sending one more person up to Washington, D.C. to advocate for us. The amount of people that are coming to our state and how many people live here, that determines how many seats we get in the House of Representatives. So in addition to that, it also defines districts. It determines the annual allocation of $675 billion in federal funding that goes to things like Medicaid, SNAP, highway planning, Section 8 housing, special education grants, Title I grants, National School Lunch Program. I mean, even if you drive a car outside, chances are you are impacted by the census in some way.
If we want a country and a government that looks like the communities that we serve, it's important that communities take part in it so we can have a governmental system that looks like the people it is meant to be of.
We've had a really big jump in population since the census in 2010. I think a lot of people are assuming we're going to get another congressional district, an 8th one to add onto the 7 congresspeople who we have presently. If we have even as little as a 1.3% undercount, that seat is not guaranteed.
Who represents us in DC depends on how many people are in Colorado. And we've had a lot of people move to Colorado, so it's possible, maybe even likely, that we're going to get another seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. That means more government officials advocating for Colorado, advocating for the issues we care about right in DC and part of the federal government.
If we don't count everybody accurately here in Colorado, we could lose our say in what goes on in Washington, D.C. and lose funding for our roads, for our bridges, for housing, for our schools. That's why it's so important that every Coloradan gets counted.
Because when they count themselves, they're really ensuring that their community has fair representation and fair federal funding allocation.
We have to make sure that we're accurately representing the state population over in DC.
If the value of a single counted person is $1,500, that would be $1,500 each year for the next 10 years.
In Colorado alone, it's over $13 billion, so it's very significant that we're all counted.
This is an opportunity for not just a select few in a community or in the state or the country to have access to power and wealth. How many opportunities come along where it's open to everyone?
We have to pay our taxes. With the census, that's our once every 10 years that we have that opportunity to bring those funds back into our community to be able to provide the programs and services that our residents need. So when you look at all the funding that we as a county and as a nation have missed out on, when people don't participate, they're not securing their future.
So if we don't do an accurate count, then that means we have 10 years of underfunding in the areas that are most critical to the population we're serving, like housing resources and healthcare resources, employment resources, education resources.
You know, the census is important to at-risk populations for the simple fact is within our communities we have a lot of barriers and we deal with a lot of without resources.
So if we look, when the first census happened in 1790, you can see they only counted free white males, free white females, slaves, and all other free people. As more people started coming inside the United States of America, you could see they started to slowly add in different groups. We can see that there's still quite a bit of racist terminology. They only counted Hindu people, even though not all Indians are Hindu, but everyone was kind of lumped into this. They used like Eskimo, they only counted Koreans. Like there's just it's very different to see how things have progressed.
Slaves were not counted as a whole. person. That was the 3/5 solution or compromise. American Indians were not counted in the first census. Later on, though, in order to achieve that fully representative government, our governing bodies realized we had to count everybody. In the 60s and the 70s is when we started to see more detailed information about race, and it's become very sophisticated. We're allowing people who are of mixed race status in 2020 say, I'm part this, I'm part that, this is who I am. If you don't fit into one, you can write down, how do you identify?
One of the main key points in history is after Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans were put into concentration camps. That was all due to census data being used wrongly. This is really where a lot of the mistrust with Asian Americans and census and government started. And it didn't just stop there. Even after 9/11, census data was used to determine which neighborhoods had Middle Eastern folks or Muslim folks. And even though that was public information, that still didn't stop law enforcement from going and targeting those neighborhoods.
To be completely honest, I believe that people in my community don't really know what the census is, or just think there's any value to doing it.
So you brought up some good points. So he talked about what some concerns were, but he also talked about what are some key voices in the community. In this training and workshop, I am going to be challenging you all to really capitalize on your public speaking skills. And a big part of that is
I want people to learn more about the census and how it can influence our lives for the next 10 years. It's a way that we can create change.
For the last year, people have been hearing about the fact that administration would like to put the citizenship question on the short form of the census to get information about if people are documented or undocumented. That has created a huge distrust within government, and although on this particular census, the 2020 census, the citizenship question is not on the census, there have been communities that have come to us directly and said, I'm still concerned about the safety and security of my information.
You can go online now and download even what the questionnaire is going to look like to show people that that is not part of the questionnaire.
Under Title 13, all information is protected. We're not sharing information with anyone else. The federal government cannot share from one agency to another. You won't have ICE showing up at your door because of your census data. But I think that that conversation is something we continuously have with our immigrant and refugee communities as well as our communities of color. It's not that everyone in an undocumented situation is Hispanic. It's not that everyone in a community of color doesn't trust the government, but it is an important conversation to have.
Within our political climate right now, people aren't likely to trust government entities, and so the controversy behind that is a matter of whether or not the citizenship question was going to be on the census. We definitely go out there and with our messaging, it's a matter of, it's 9 questions, it's available online or by mail, over the phone, or in person. Population count, that's all we need. That's all we need.
There's a lot of fear in our communities, and with that fear, there's a lot of concern about why should I even fill out the census in the first place.
I am the oldest child in an immigrant family that resides in rural Colorado. And when my family was receiving these mailings back in 2010 to complete the 2010 census, I was the person that was a decision maker in my family for those types of mailings. And I was very skeptical of what they were. So I simply threw them away because I didn't understand what their value was, and I honestly thought that it was just another scam that was trying to get information from my family.
Through executive order, the previous governor, Governor Hickenlooper, had put through an effort to have the Complete Count campaign starting in December of 2018. We are at the Department of Local Affairs down on 13th and Sherman. We will have about 50 people present, and our Complete Count committee is made up of 36 people, and then we have some delegates that are from all across the state, representing Arapahoe County, representing Montrose, all of those places that are really putting together how Colorado has done the complete and full count for the state.
A complete count committee is a number of folks that are within a community, or it could be a state as well, but for Adams County specific, it's representation from our municipalities, whether that's someone from a communications department or a city planner or town planner. They come together at this meeting to understand what the need is for census outreach efforts.
My role as a partnership specialist is to see what does it look like to identify key trusted community voices and get them to really become advocates for the 2020 census and understand just how important the 2020 census is to their respective community.
It's really a great network of leaders, people from both the private and the public sector to come together and express the best ways and methods and strategic practices in order to make sure we can get an accurate count in Colorado.
House Bill 19-1239 was the bill that put the $6 million into the Department of Local Affairs budget to then grant out to organizations that can hit and reach those hard-to-count populations.
Through the grant resources and what we represent as a trusted entity in the community, we really hope to remove some of those stigmas and to make it a collective effort that the community can really engage in.
The state brought together Native leadership and we all got trained. It all depends on how well we put together what resources we have. We want to have at least a part-time person in each of the 3 agencies to really be the lead. I think a lot more people are connecting the dots in terms of the importance of the census, and it's not just about the money, but that's a very important part of it.
I look at each municipality and how do we bring it all together? And so bringing all these groups back to the CCC, the Complete Count Committee, we can all link arms and help one another. In this countywide effort with this large group, we can't just focus on just hard to count populations, but that's definitely strategic in our approach countywide.
At the U.S. Census Bureau, when we're really considering hard to count populations, we're looking at communities that are difficult to interview, difficult to contact, difficult to locate, and difficult to persuade. And that is really important for us to understand what are the challenges and barriers that might be present in the community that might prevent people or create barriers for people to engaging in the 2020 census.
How do we get to them? How can we help them? Whether it's even a neighbor taking over their laptop and saying, hey, let me help you fill this out. Those are the efforts that we are trying to instill in folks. It's not just, here, we hope you do this. No, let's see how we can work on this together. It's just a matter of really building a relationship. Whether you see that person ever again, at least I say us as a team have made that effort to impact that one person because we feel that that person may share that information with another. And a prize will always draw people to your table, but you don't want to just give a prize and hope they understand what the census means. It was always a matter of we need to ask them questions. Let's put them on the hot spot for a second, but we'll make it fun. And they'll walk away knowing, I just learned something today. Connecting with the community face-to-face adds value because we're all community-minded in one aspect or another.
It extends beyond an initial interaction. They make a commitment that they are going to partner with us and make sure that their community is counted. So trust is an absolutely essential ingredient to that.
It's really important to know that every Coloradan counts, and our marginalized communities, communities of color, rural communities need to be heard. An important part of being heard is people knowing that you're there in the first place.
I grew up in Adams County, and I would like to see this community thrive on census funding. And so I talk about that. I come from the approach that I'm not going to tell you something that I won't do myself.
For me, that's been interacting with community leaders within the Burmese, within the Rohingya, within the Nigerian communities, and being provided an opportunity to speak to the key trusted leaders that are then like, yes, we didn't realize that the 2020 census is so important. We want to support your messaging around this, and we want to help you, help us get that complete count.
So a lot of times with a census or counting, it really becomes a numbers game. What you're seeing here behind me is actually the people who are impacted by what happens every day or doesn't happen every day.
The census is important to veterans because it's a platform to be able to identify those veterans that could be in need of services. It's a nice way to gather that information so that we can look at how can we better serve our veteran population. We want them to access benefits and healthcare services and or any other resources that are out there in the community.
All of those programs are funded by the federal government. We need to demonstrate
how many veterans are in the state of Colorado and their impact on it. It involves changes in legislation, it involves demographics, because the census is not just a snapshot, it also helps us to project in the future what are some of the programs that are going to be important for not only Colorado, but nationwide. This is just another way of giving back to the community.
Many people experiencing homelessness are also members of the population of people that are veterans and that have served the country and have come back to find that they're in a high-cost housing market that they can no longer access. The Colorado Coalition for the Homeless is a housing and healthcare provider. We also provide supportive services to keep people stably housed and connect them with services that they may need to get them on a path to housing. So we go out to encampments. We have staff that are regularly visiting places where people are living outside and building those relationships. It doesn't mean that the very first time we approach someone that they want to talk to us or that they want to immediately accept our offer of services. But we have folks that are really skilled in building that trust relationship and eventually connecting people to the services, the housing, the healthcare that they might need to get them on a path to stability.
So from the statewide perspective, we know that homelessness looks very different in 2020 than it did in 2010. We have people that are working poor. We have people that are living in their cars. We have people that are renting a week-to-week motel room, but they are still considered homeless. And so the outreach that we're doing is not only in partnership with the homeless shelters, but it's meeting people where they are, and that's why businesses are so important to the outreach that we're doing, because the employees of those organizations might actually be homeless. So group quarters count is something that happens in very specific locations. They're nursing homes, prisons, military barracks, universities, non-commuter campuses. So for example, University of Colorado Boulder would be considered a group quarters count. CSU would be considered a group quarter count. So we're actually doing outreach with the Department of Higher Education to do conversations at the president level of those universities to let students know that they are actually counted in group quarters, and then they trickle that message to their parents as well. So we've actually used some outreach efforts to reach the re-entry population. These are individuals that are coming out of prison before the count happens, and they won't be counted in group quarters.
The difficulty of why it's hard to count is there's a lot of politics, policies, and procedures for when they re-enter into our community. If they're coming out of custody and residing in certain areas, it's hard to get them counted. Our organization, Lifeline, we become a part of their parole plan, and then we could help them and navigate them to the point of being able to fill out their ballot and have their voice heard.
We really need to ensure that there's trusted voices in the community having these conversations. So making sure that we're engaging with those hard to count populations with their leadership. It's having the conversations with a faith-based leader saying, let's do a census Sunday. While everybody's in church, we can all stand up and fill out our census on our cell phones. That would be a really cool idea. But that's coming from their faith-based leadership. It's not coming from the government. So the way that we've been identifying and working in hard to count communities is finding those trusted voices in each of these communities and saying, help us talk to the people that you work with, the ones that you see every single day, to ensure that we can get a complete and accurate count from that community. A majority of people live in the Front Range of Colorado, but we have some very specific efforts through our State Complete Count Committee. We have a subcommittee for rural Colorado, and those individuals are helping us identify messaging for people who might be hard to count.
This being the first online census, libraries are going to play a much, much larger role in census completion than they ever have before. So having an informed library staff that can answer those questions, and people are being encouraged to really fill out their census information online. Libraries are there in their communities to give people accessibility to the technology they need to fill out their census.
Libraries have been great partners throughout the years with the Census Project, and we think it's really just because people trust us. They know this is a place that they can come, where they can get help, and that is going to be true this year as well.
Another group that we've identified was children under 5. So we have an education and youth subcommittee that is focused on how we get the Department of Education to have conversations with these school districts and with the teachers in these classrooms, because they're the trusted voices.
So Colorado specifically gets about $13 billion every single year for programs that we use to serve people living across the state. And about $2 billion of those dollars go to programs that make sure that kids have access to early learning opportunities, that they're able to go to the doctor when they're sick or injured, and that they they have good schools to attend. And so if parents don't know how important the census is and how it actually benefits their kids, we're concerned that they could think, I don't want to include my child's name, birthday on this government survey. I'm going to leave them off in an attempt to protect them, when in fact what that's doing is decreasing the resources available to that community to be able to serve its children.
Even if they're born on Census Day, we need to know that, even if they're 0 years old, because that's 10 years down the line. I mean, these 10, 11 questions, they're going to impact the next 10 years. So when that child is now 10 years old and they're starting to tap into these resources, we want to make sure that there's enough funding for them as well.
If you think about other civic activities that we do, kids often aren't included. They can't vote, they can't serve on juries, they can't run for office. And so the census is really one of the only civic things that we do where kids count just as much as everyone else.
Aurora, for me, is the most diverse city in Colorado and a representation of what America can actually look like. We have a melting pot. We serve different communities. We speak 160 languages in Aurora, and we are open to diversity, to change, and we want to serve every single person that actually comes to Aurora and call Aurora home.
Well, Aurora is the 54th largest city in America by population, and it's one of the most diverse cities in the United States. And so it's very important that we participate as a city in the census. That's a key focus of ours in a city where 20% of our residents are born outside the United States.
So the census has come out with 56 language guides that are available online. So those language guides online pretty much have the census in English, and then it translated in whatever language it is, so people can look side by side, okay, this is what the question is asking, here are the answers, here's what I select.
So we talked a lot about government trust. We talked a lot about language barriers. We talked a lot about, where do community spaces gather? And we talked a lot about how do we build importance, right? How do we let the parents know that, hey, you should do this because your child's education and school system depends on it? I want to make sure you know how the census is easy, safe, and important, that you literally can talk about it verbatim, and that you are confident enough to go up in front of a group of people and talk about it.
People say that Census Day is on April 1st. That's true. However, you're able to fill out your census before that date. If you get your card in the mail, you can go and fill out your census online. It's not like you have to wait till April 1st. You can also fill it out afterwards all the way through what's called self-response time. Once that ends, you will get the enumerator that comes out starting around the beginning of May, and they will be able to collect information and have people fill out their census all the way through July of 2020.
Once we've gotten all the online responses, the telephone responses, and any paper responses from across the country, we'll be at that point training census takers. And here in Colorado, we will have somewhere around 8,000 of those census takers.
So it wasn't until an enumerator that came to our home more than 4 times knocking on the door, and it wasn't until our neighbor that told her, hey, they have a family business, maybe you should go visit them there in order to get this household information, that I really truly understood what the 2010 census was. So she took the time to come to my family's business and really explain to us why the 2010 census was important. And it was through her ability to very well articulate how important the 2010 census was that compelled me as a decision maker in my family to really make sure that my 5 younger siblings and my parents were accounted for in the 2010 census. So when the 2020 census conversation was coming back around, I wanted to make sure that families that had the same type of family structure as mine really understood how the 2020 census was easy, safe, and important, and were really compelled and motivated to participate in it.
If those individuals don't have Census Bureau identification, they're not from the census. So it's very important that people recognize what census employees look like. Census Bureau employees take a lifetime oath. It doesn't just stop with their temporary employment. They take a lifetime oath to not share this information. And if they do, they face up to 5 years of federal prison time and up to $250,000 fines.
They will be earning fairly decent wages, somewhere around $20 per hour here in Colorado. We hope to keep them very close to home because they're comfortable and familiar with their own neighborhoods.
I mean, it's a great way for civic engagement to become part of the process. So it's going to be fun.
Very few people can say, I work on something that's specifically outlined in the Constitution.
Tying the census in within our partnerships to be able to have the right data and the proper counting, it allows us to accurately distribute the monies across the communities. That allows Colorado to leverage ourselves.
People will be getting forms in the mail for this census any day now. And with only 10 minutes of your time, you can make sure that your voice is counted. I'm excited because we want to make sure that Colorado has its place that we've earned on the map.
We don't care where you're from. We don't care if you're documented or undocumented. We want you to know that you matter and you belong with our state. And so regardless of what it is that you've got going on in your life, if you're homeless, if you're low income, if you're older adult, if you're a child under 5, all of those hard to count communities really do matter for the state of Colorado.
April 1st is Census Day, and your response matters. A complete and accurate count is critical for you and your community. Be seen, be heard, be counted.
Be heard, be seen, be counted.
My name is Naomi. እታያለሁ፣ እሰማለሁ፣ እቆጠራለሁ።
My name is Michael. 看到我，听到我，包括我。
My name is Elisha. 의견을 내고 만나고 통계에 포함되세요.
My name is Michelle. Haz de escuchar, haz de ver, haz de contar.
My name is Isaac. እታያለሁ, እሰማለሁ, እቆጠራለሁ.
My name is Miyako. Ako ay mahalaga.
Everyone counts in Colorado.